Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein.
This week's topic will be, again, vaccinations and halacha and other. Part 2, we're going to have both physicians, rabbanim. Should be a very interesting program. We have with us on the phone from Los Angeles, California, Mr. Del Bigtree. He's the CEO of Informed Consent Action Network, which he'll probably correct my definition, but I believe it's an advocate that is anti-vaccine and promotes the theory that vaccinations are not healthy and maybe should not be practiced by the public. Instead of me putting words into his mouth, Mr. Bigtree, I'm going to allow you to do it. But is that sort of a fair introduction?
Well, David, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on. I would say I'm an advocate for vaccine safety. What our nonprofit does is look into the studies to see if vaccines are safe, and if they're not being done, we're demanding that those vaccine safety studies be done. I work with Bobby Kennedy a lot. We had a meeting with the National Institute of Health last year set up by Donald Trump. We got to meet with Tony Fauci, head of infectious disease, Francis Collins, head of the NIH, and other luminaries of the CDC and FDA. And our concern was that we couldn't find a single double-blind, inert placebo study, which is how you approve drugs to be on the market. You compare one group that gets the drug with a group that gets like a saline injection or a sugar pill. And when we said we can't find that study being done on a single childhood vaccine, they agreed. They said it's never been done. They consider it unethical to do that type of study on a vaccine. So essentially last year, the heads of our health department admitted they've never used a scientific method to establish safety. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, so I know you just give us a lot of information. So when you say that you believe in the study of vaccination for childhood of vaccine safety, are there any vaccines that you would take?
Currently, no, because there's not a single vaccine that's been through a proper safety study.
So that includes polio. That includes polio. That includes. You would not give any vaccines.
I would not. I would not tell people not to. I'm just telling you personally, I would not.
So let me ask you a question. In the last 100 years, I'm talking that zip code, mortality by children has dropped by 100%. In other words, if you lived in Germany, which was the most advanced Western country 100 years ago, your chances of dying as a child were 1 out of every 2 children did not make it past childhood. And if you would ask the body of physicians, JAMA, et cetera, they would say that is substantially because of vaccines. So if you were the president of the United States, you would say, return us to the period of where we were 100 years ago because of our inability, granted, to do the double-blind study, and let's eliminate vaccines and go back to where we were, where 1 out of every 2 children didn't make it through childhood?
Well, let me put it clearly then. If I was going to try and return us back, I'd have to rip out all the toilets, all the clean running water, let horses and sewage run through our streets, and live in a total lifestyle of squalor, which is what you're trying to compare us to.
I don't think Germany, Germany, Berlin, if you go to Berlin 100 years ago, I'm not talking about Krakow or some backwater of, I'm talking about the most Western advanced country in the world. 1 out of 2 children died. Where Freud lived, Schopenhauer. I mean, there were not sewage running in the streets.
Let's move to a modern age where we have a better comparator, like where we actually have, better medicine, better running water, cleaner sewage systems, all of those things. You would have to agree we've gotten better at that, right? So let's look at measles. This whole hysteria is over measles. Here's my issue with measles. If you take the CDC's number, in 1960, before there was ever a vaccine for measles, the death rate of measles was 1 in 500,000 in America. That's 0.0002% chance of dying. You're running around in New Jersey right now hysterical over a handful of people who have a disease that kills 0.0002%.
Well,
that's a childhood, it's a trivial illness. It was a Brady Bunch episode in the 1960s, and you want me to be terrified of that disease?
No. But if you go to the CDC website, they say measles kills 1 to 2 in 1,000. right? Not
Not
1
true.
in 500. I'll
That's
put it
not
online. Okay, this is what they're putting on their site. And
additionally,
let me
go to
just
my website and see my CDC stat.
okay, and we have
1 in 500,000.
We actually have a doctor we're interviewing later today, who took care of children in Africa, and he said measles
let's
went
go to
through.
Africa.
Wait, let me finish.
Africa.
Mr. Bigtree.
That makes sense.
Wait, he said he was
Somewhere
in Africa.
There's no running water, no sewage.
And he said that measles killed 20 people in the village that he was in, and
of
which
course.
is
so does dysentery.
not one out of 500,000. One out of.
Again, let me just be clear, David. I'm not arguing vaccines in the third world where there's no clean running water and no sewage. That is my argument. That you cannot make comparisons. You all want to go to world stats. I'm talking about America's stats. And 1 in 1,000 is still 0.001%.
Okay, but
we shouldn't be forcing. We should not be forcing injections into free Americans because of a less than 0% chance
let's continue.
of death if you get the disease, by the way. Your stat is if you get the disease.
Mr. Bigtree, 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 500, it says between 1 and 2 to 1,000, the CDC says on its site. Now, it also says, right, 1 out of 4 will end up in the hospital, right? As many as 3 out of 10.
That stat doesn't mean anything to me.
Okay,
because
but continue, though. Let me just finish the stats. 3 out of 10 will end up with pneumonia. 3 out of 10 will end up with pneumonia, right? So they won't die from measles. 1 out of 20 will contract encephalitis, a 50% chance of dying of encephalitis. What else does it continue?
If you have a 50% chance of dying of encephalitis, how do you have a 1 in 1,000 death rate? That makes no sense.
That's from the measles. That's from the measles vaccine. From the measles directly.
You said you have a 50% chance of dying of encephalitis. That would be 1 in 2 would be dying, not 1 in 1,000.
No. The measles directly will kill 1 or 2 in 1,000. There are adjunct diseases that measles will trigger. Pneumonia is not measles. It is a side product of a disease that comes because of measles, right? Measles will trigger pneumonia. The death from pneumonia is much higher than 1 in 1,000, right? The death rate of encephalitis.
You're telling me you think that the CDC wouldn't call it a measles death if they died of pneumonia. I'm pretty sure they're bolstering the numbers as much as they can on measles because they're trying to create a fear of measles so that we all vaccinate. Their job is to promote vaccination.
So wait.
But I'm still at the same stat the CDC has. 1 in 500,000 die in a population. I'll go with your 1 in 1,000 die, but that is still a less than 0 risk of dying. And personally, I'm willing to take on that risk to have the health benefits of receiving measals. And here is the health benefits of
what about the pneumonia, encephalitis, and hearing loss that comes from that?
By the way, all of those are listed side effects of the vaccine itself.
I understand
They're all
that,
listed on the vaccine. So why should I be forced to take on the risks of the vaccine if they're the same risk of naturally getting the disease when if my child naturally gets the disease, they are immune for life. They are the greatest benefit to supposed herd immunity there is. They don't have to get vaccinated 4 or 5 times throughout their life to attempt to hold on to immunity. They have perfect, healthy immunity.
So would you prefer to go back to the age in Germany 100 years ago, the age of Schopenhauer?
I prefer to go back to 1960.
Where you had
to go back to 1960.
Where they had 1 in 2 deaths. 1 in 2 children died. So you could have the vaccinations the CDC says are extremely remote. Any byproduct.
Why don't we go back to the biblical age? Why don't we go back to the biblical age?
Okay.
Why stop at 100 years if we're going to make irrelevant references?
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we can go back to. If you go back to the year, let's say 2000, you'll find that the death rate of childhood was higher than 1 in 2, right? So the further we go back with medicine. No, you're talking. We don't have America. There wasn't in the year 0, 2,000 years ago. To my knowledge, there was no records of death here in America. But when we go back to early Roman times, right?
Correct.
Childhood death. So the further we go,
Agreed.
So the majority of doctors say that the difference between 1 and 2 deaths in imagine a family of 5, 2.5 would die. A family of 4,
there's not a credible,
children would
there's
die.
Not a credible doctor that was not a credible doctor that would say that vaccines did more than toilets and clean running water. But let's talk about the Bible for a second, because it's a religious issue. There's a whole Jewish community involved here. And I would say that when I look at the Old Testament, and if we're supposed to have religious freedom, which is something that I think the Jewish community really cares about based on the history in this world, being allowed to believe in their God, and the Bible says you were born in the image and likeness of God. God comes into Adam and Eve. They've covered themselves in leaves, and God says, who told you weren't perfect? Who told you need to be clothed? And I ask you, who's telling you need 72 vaccines now by the time you're 18 to live on planet Earth that God created? Are we saying we're not created in the image and likeness of God? Would God need 72 vaccines to live on this planet? Now, people would say, well,
so
that's
wait,
not
so
a
Mr. Bigtree, let's accept that argument. So would you say that a religious person then, in the image of God, should not use doctors or hospitals, period?
No, I would say that...
Why not? God doesn't use a doctor or a hospital, so if we're in the image of God, why should we use a doctor or use a hospital?
I think it's different to go to a doctor when you're injured by something than to inject something into yourself when you're perfectly healthy.
Well, but if we're working with the image of God argument, if our argument is the image of God argument, God doesn't take injections when he's sick, and neither should we.
That is until you are sick. If you fall out of a tree, break an arm, go to a doctor.
Why? God doesn't go to doctors.
I think God would if he fell out of a tree.
So maybe God would get inoculated. God would get inoculated, not to get MMR, not to get the whole whooping cough or all the other diseases.
I disagree.
Well,
all I'm saying is it's up for religious interpretation. What you're saying is I'm only allowed your religious interpretation. My religious interpretation is that my body is made whole and perfect, that perhaps the diseases that I've been in concert with for thousands of years, that and evolution could argue the same point, that we're perfectly designed to live on this planet. If diseases were so bad, why are we still here? How are we populating the planet? Why weren't we wiped off the planet?
Mr. Bigtree, those are good questions.
We're perfectly designed.
So let me ask you a question then. If 100 years ago or 75 years ago, the life expectancy was 40. Today in the United States, it's close to 80. Now, most people would agree it's because of modern medicine. It's not because we were created perfect. Because of evolution, we're able to fight all these viruses. But medicine has made a difference between 40 and 80. So are you suggesting we go back to the age where, I don't know how old you are, but I wouldn't be alive anymore for this conversation if we went back to this period. I don't know how old you are, Mr. Bigtree. Are you more than 40?
Let's go ahead. Let's look at the 80-year-olds, since you're saying we've expanded to being 80-year-olds. Everybody that's 80 got natural measles. They were allowed to go to school when they got it, and they're perfectly healthy, and they didn't die. And they have lifelong immunity that protects them all the way into their old age. They got maybe 5 to 10 vaccines, and we said that was perfect, and it worked well. Then, in 1986, we took away liability from the pharmaceutical industry. Why? Because they were being sued for so many injuries by vaccines they couldn't make money. So they told Ronald Reagan, if you want vaccines, you have to protect us from liability. We took all liability away from a product because it was so problematic and gave it to the government. In that exact moment, the vaccine program explodes to 72 vaccines over several years. So you're telling me that it's illegal to want to live with the 5 to 10 vaccines that these great 80-year-olds and the benefits of modern society got. It's illegal for me to raise my kids that same way. Why does Grandpa
have
lifelong immunity to disease, but my kids cannot?
Okay, so let's respond. I think that to say that we want to go back to the age where lifespan was 40, I would vote very strongly against because
I want to go back to
because I'm more than 40. Well, I can't divide it. I'm telling you, pre and post vaccine, medicine say it doubled lifespan. No, I'm saying that medicine, the vast majority of physicians today, right, the IMA had a long article about it, say that JAMA has had articles about it, New England Journal of Medicine has articles, vaccines have doubled lifespan. But now you mentioned tort liability about vaccinations.
But hold on. Let's stay here because this is the whole point. I'll go back to tort.
Yeah.
So this is the fact. These are the facts. I only state facts that we now know across the country. I state medical journal facts.
Yeah.
So we say that we need herd immunity, that there's an outcry for herd immunity. Herd immunity for measles is 95% of society needs to be vaccinated. The stats show that adults, and everyone listening to this radio show can question themselves, have I had a booster in the last 10 years? No, you have not. About almost half the population, all of the adults, or somewhere in the 80% range, have not had a booster shot for measles in the last 10 years. That means we are not near the 95% rate for herd immunity. We're somewhere around 40 to 60%. So herd immunity doesn't exist.
So you're saying that all the doctors are all the doctors wrong?
I'm saying that.
Are all the doctors wrong? I just want to know, what's your argument? There's 200,000 doctors in the United States. Are they all wrong?
They've all been lied to and misled.
Let me ask you, Mr. Bigtree, do you have a medical degree?
No, what I have is I'm a journalist. And so
but
what
I do is where did you go to school? May I ask you where you went to school?
Actually, would it matter if I told you I was self-taught? What difference does it make?
Because,
can
I ask you something, Mr. Bigtree? You're self-taught and you're a journalist. Would you operate on somebody based upon, a journal? You took out a newspaper, the instructions how to do brain surgery, take, mallet, break skull. We're self-taught. I could do it. You could. We could all do this. Let's go, baby. Let's go grab knives and start cutting.
Let me tell you what a journalist does. A journalist interviews scientists. A journalist interviews people, and I write what I see. And I write. So
if 37 medical journals, and I'll give you the list of them, the most prestigious ones in the world, all say that vaccination is the biggest breakthrough in medicine, greater than antibiotics, and has doubled the lifespan of people, does that count?
The publishers of most of those journals and the editors are now all agreeing that you cannot trust the science published in journals because it's being done with a bias by the pharmaceutical industry that is also funding the journals. That's the fact.
So they're bought off. The medical journals are paid off by the whatchamacall, by Big Pharma.
No, well, here's the bigger problem. No one is challenging the science being done by the pharmaceutical industry. We think, and this is the truth. All I've done is investigated. I will admit to you, I'm not a doctor.
Do you think the journals are paid off? Are the journals paid off? That's my question.
I know for a fact that most of the journals are being funded by the pharmaceutical industry. Do
you think the U.S. Congress is bought off by the pharma?
No. So let me make this clear. I know you're trying to build a conspiracy theory idea. I don't believe that doctors are knowingly misleading people. I don't believe that Congress is knowingly misleading people. What I know is that all the science that they're being shown, or the greater majority of it, is being funded by the very industry that makes billions of dollars off the product. That's what I know. And so
they've been able. So pharma has been able to do a sleight of hands. Pharma has been able to do a sleight of hands and fool all the doctors, all the medical journals, the Senate, the House, the CDC, the World Health Organization, et cetera, et cetera. They've been able to fool everybody.
They just did it with OxyContin, didn't they?
I don't know.
Isn't that exactly the problem we have? Yes.
So they have been able to.
Epidemic that's killing 60,000 people a year, and if
they've done it again.
For it, doctors have injected knowingly poisoned people with OxyContin. Yes, it is possible to manipulate the FDA.
So the journals have fooled. The journals have done it twice now. They've done it twice.
They've done it multiple times.
The pharma has fooled everybody twice.
The journals were also behind tobacco smoking when all we were allowing was the industry to do the tobacco science. Yes.
Well, so can I?
Throughout history, this happens over and over and over again.
So pharma has.
Were doctors not recommending tobacco at one point? Yes, they were. Did they know that they were poisoning people? No, they didn't.
So my question would be is just like tobacco, right, has been investigated and proven to be dangerous, right?
Correct.
So the question is, since there are 1 billion inoculations, multiple billions on every year in the United States, and many of us would say that the majority, or certainly a substantial amount of physicians love their patients, love their work, and are very dedicated scientists with the fiduciary to the families, that they think. So people came in and they coughed, and the physicians screamed, and big pharma and big tobacco was taken down, right? But we're not seeing that equivalent by vaccines. In fact, we've interviewed multiple physicians who say that they believe that the vaccines have indeed extended life and brought greater health. So why is it that tobacco was taken down, asbestos was taken down, many other things were taken down, but on the other hand, vaccines seem to be flourishing?
Well, because the CDC and the HHS and government agencies never mandated tobacco upon the population. And had they mandated tobacco on the population, they would have been in a real problem to come out and admit, actually, as it turns out, it does cause cancer. they were more likely, if that was the case, had they been forcing it upon the population, to hide it because it's going to make the government look really bad.
So the government is behind this. The government is behind this too now.
I believe your issue is Health and Human Services itself, the mothership of our health department, and here's
You're
why.
saying the government is fooling us.
I'm saying HHS and a small group of scientists inside of HHS are fooling us.
And what about CDC?
CDC is under Health and Human
What
Services.
about
so
World Health Organization? What about WHO? World Health Organization.
They get most of their information from the CDC. You
And
see,
what about
from
things
the
like the New England Journal of Medicine?
That's just a journal that publishes what a pharmaceutical industry puts up as science. But
no. If you look at what the New Jersey England of Medicine, if you go to their website, they give an exact definition of what it takes to get onto it, and it's very, very trying. They say they get 5,000 submissions a month, every single month. They have it's peer reviewed. They have a group of 100 doctors that go through all 5,000 articles. They pick the most relevant ones. So are all the board of the New Jersey England Medicine, are they also being paid off by HHS or by CDC or by WHO or by the government? Are they also in the pocket?
Let me just say that I don't think it's only about money. I also think that there's a real passionate, almost religious belief in the safety of vaccines. And it's understandable. I think it's perfectly reasonable to want to end infectious disease. I'm not against that idea. My issue is that none of these groups are testing for safety. All they care about is efficacy. And here's the numbers I want to talk about.
Let me tell you why, though. Let me tell you why, just so we educate our public. The reason why they do not test, they don't do, like you said, the double-blind study, which means they would take, let's say, 10,000 unvaccinated children and 10,000 vaccinated children, is because usually when they do a double-blind study, they don't want to put the people at risk. So they would say, we have a new asthma medication. So you continue taking your old asthma medication. We're going to give 1,000 people the new asthma medication, 1,000 people just their old medication. Let's see the difference. To do a double-blind study for vaccine would mean you would have to take 1,000 children and tell their parents, don't vaccinate them. So if X number of them die because of that, in effect, whoever's doing that study would be a murderer. So it's not ethical.
Okay.
Let me this is fact. I'm not saying an opinion.
It is fact. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm not going to fight you on this.
Okay, so that's why they don't. Now, the reason why the government put tort liability in for vaccines, the reason is, and if you look at the minutes of the Congress, of the debate, is because they felt that the protection to society was so great, and being, again, lifespan has gone up by double, basically, because of, they think vaccinations have a big part of it. So the government protects many industries that I feel are vital to the security and well-being of the people. And
really? What other industries?
I'll give you a few, right? Starters. Can you sue an airline for being late or on time or anything like that? It's impossible. And the reason was
the government... Sue them if you die? No, hold on. I know it's not about late or on time. I can sue them if I die.
It's very difficult. The government instituted tort, but you could look it up.
I can go to a courtroom and I can sue.
You can sue, but you'll have a very difficult time. The FAA has the government has put in very strict tort liability, very strict.
Being able to sue.
Well, I'm just telling you, there are strict tort liability. I'll give you a few other examples as well. Besides,
give me another one.
Okay,
that one didn't work.
It worked.
I can sue.
No,
I can sue the airline if I die in a crash,
or
my wife does.
You can sue in the vaccine. Hello, you could sue vaccines too. Hello.
No, you can't.
You could sue in the vaccine court.
That is not a real court.
Well, that's a definition. It has real judges. It is giving out $3 billion. Obviously, it's a real court.
It does not have a judge. You're wrong.
Okay.
It does not have a judge.
Okay, so it has a master.
So you're wrong.
Okay, those are they have a different name when they work for the federal government. And they've given out $3 billion. Have they given out $3 billion? So can you sue?
I think it's more like 4 now.
Okay, so did they do it because people sued or not? Okay,
they
that's
sued the
my
government
case.
of the United States.
Well,
No. Here's the problem.
Yeah.
Suing the government of the United States creates no incentive for the manufacturer to make a safer product. That's the problem.
But I'm just telling you, but you can sue.
Let me finish. The reason we need lawsuits in courtrooms is so that you can incentivize an industry like a car industry that has failing brakes or a car seat company that the car seat doesn't work and kids die. The reason you need to be able to sue in court is so that the manufacturer has to pay those damages, and therefore, in order to avoid those damages, they have to make a better product. If you take the liability,
let me give you a few other tort liabilities.
Hold on, let me just finish my sentence.
Yeah.
Suing the government of the United States puts no pressure upon the manufacturer to make a better product. That's my problem.
Okay, so let me continue.
I want liability back on the industry.
Okay.
Give me that, and I'll shut up right now. Put liability back on the industry. This product is so great, and they're clear. They know they're admitting they make tens of billions of dollars off of it. Why can't they pay for their own lawsuit?
You know what? I think it's a valid point that there has to be greater liability. But notwithstanding that, let me give you other examples of where there is tort liability. Can you sue a judge?
You've answered my point. It doesn't. I mean, we could go on, but let's not waste time here. You just acquiesced to my point.
I said that yes, we should have. We should have, but notwithstanding that, it still has. And the reason they've done it is because
something else.
Well, I just want to forget the reason why they did it is they said anything that is increased lifespan by 100% deserves to be treated with kid gloves. That's the logic behind the limitation of tort liabilities. Because you're over than 40. I saw a picture of you now on the internet. I'm older than 40. Neither of us would be debating this if it weren't for vaccines.
No, let me ask you. Neither of us got the vaccine.
Well, I was fully vaccinated.
I'm not going to debate. Right, you got 10 vaccines.
I don't know if I got 10 or 30.
No, I'll tell you factually. The CDC recommendation was 10 vaccines for you and I, and now it's 72.
Well, I guess they're getting better at what they're doing.
Really? It couldn't possibly be that taking liability away made a cash flow. They didn't have to worry about dangers, and so they just flooded the market. By the way, 250 vaccines in the pipeline.
So, Del, do you have children? Do you have children?
I do.
Are they vaccinated?
9 and 4.
So I'm saying for polio, for nothing.
No, first of all, there's no need to have a polio vaccine. Polio doesn't exist in America.
Well, until a few years ago. So you would not have vaccinated for polio had it been prevalent at the time?
I'm not going to make hypothetical statements about times I didn't live in. I won't even tell you what I would do if I was living in Africa. I'm not sure. I'm not a person that's saying no vaccines ever. What I'm saying is safe vaccines for healthy children, and it should be the parent's choice, especially on trivial childhood illnesses that have a 0.0002% chance of my child dying. I'm willing to take that risk versus the hundreds of thousands of parents around the world who got an MMR vaccine in their child and said they got fevers, seizures, and now are in diapers as adults and have had autism.
So let's look at that, because you produced a movie to that effect called Vaxxed, okay?
I did. That's right.
So let's talk about that movie, okay? So the main proponent in the movie was Dr. Andrew Wakefield.
Actually, no. No, the main proponent was a CDC scientist, Dr. William Thompson, who came forward from the CDC and said, we're committing scientific fraud.
Well, wasn't Wakefield one of the producers? If you go to the movie, it says Wakefield.
No, better than that. I'm not hiding anything. He was the director.
Okay, so Andrew Wakefield is a director. So let's talk about Andrew Wakefield. He was the first one who came out screaming against vaccines and was published in The Lancet, one of the great journals.
I would say screaming is a bit of an overstatement.
An article. Yes. And it created a big brouhaha in the world. And it was subsequently discovered that he was receiving payments from a law firm that was suing vaccine companies. None of this is I believe, in dispute.
Yeah, I don't. So let me ask you this. Right now, there's doctors, Paul Offit, and people that make money that are pro-vaccine that go into courtrooms and stand for the other side of parents that are trying to force vaccinate when they've had a divorce, to force vaccinate the child. Why do you have a problem with someone that is questioning vaccines being on the stand, but you don't have a problem when doctors all the time go on the stand? They make money off of vaccines, and they make money from appearing in court.
Because I'll tell you that
double standard.
I'll tell you there's a very big difference. Let me answer the question, okay? I think that when a doctor comes into court and he says, my name is Dr. So-and-so, and I'm very pro-vaccine, right? And I admit I'm pro-vaccine and I'm part of the vaccine industry, and I'm gonna give you my and I'm gonna testify. Everybody looks at it and they weigh: is he biased? Is he not biased? When somebody publishes a report, all right, in a journal, a scientific journal,
it's called a case study. It was a case
study, and he doesn't disclose. he doesn't disclose, right, that he is on the take from law firms that are seeking to sue companies, right, that benefit from the very exact case study that he is doing, that is dishonest, to the point where he was the equivalent of disbarred. He lost his medical license in England. Now, in the United States,
that's not why he lost his medical license.
Well, in the United States, if somebody did that, for example, what just happened in Columbia University where they found some of the doctors were investing, the guy was thrown out of his job for that reason, right? So there's a very big difference. There's a very big difference between being fraudulent and not disclosing, right, and disclosing and saying, I am biased, and take it for what it's worth.
Okay, so if someone wants to look up Stanley Plotkin on YouTube right now, Stanley Plotkin, who created rotavirus with Paul Offit and many other vaccines, is on the stand testifying against a parent that doesn't want to vaccinate their child. And on the stand, he ends up having to admit that he left out of his CV the fact that he's on the board of hundreds of pharmaceutical companies and has made money. He left it off of his own CV. So
he must have, I imagine he was, the judge said he's a less than credible witness because of that. If I were the judge, that's what I would say.
Guess what? He bailed out and didn't end up being on the stand. That was just in his deposition.
Right. So that is exactly my point. That is exactly, when you are not credible, when you don't disclose things, that is my point, you are not credible as a witness, and because of that, Wakefield's entire thing was thrown out, and he lost his license, right? Now let's continue.
Let's discuss why he actually lost his license. Can we discuss that? So because there's a lot of conjecture, I will tell you why he lost his license. He lost his license because of medical misconduct, okay? There's a reason why I'm saying this. There was two people, by the way, not one scientist, two. Professor John Walker Smith lost his license also, okay? They both lost it for one simple reason. The medical council ruled that they had not gotten ethical approval for the colonoscopies and the spinal taps of children whose parents said they were having bowel issues that seemed to coincide with their autism, okay? Now, John Walker Smith got his license back about 2 years ago because he fought it all the way through court, and what we now know is that the reason they ruled that it was unethical was because there's 2 points. You either have clinical investigation or medical research. In clinical investigation, that means I'm doing a biopsy or I'm doing a colonoscopy on my patient to make them healthier. If I'm doing that, I don't need to go to my ethical board. If I'm doing medical research where I'm doing a colonoscopy or a biopsy of some kind, and it's only for a research product for the good of humanity but not necessarily this patient, that's medical research. I need ethical approval. The General Medical Council said that what they were doing was medical research, not clinical investigation. But John Walker Smith won his case saying that I treated every one of those 12 kids for years beyond that study. Therefore, it was clinical investigation. We never needed ethical approval. And guess what? He got his license back. And guess what?
So let me read from you the GMC. This is from the British General Medical Council's investigation. On 28 January 2010, a 5-member statutory tribunal of the GMC found 36 charges proved, including 4 counts of dishonesty, 12 counts involving the abuse of developmentally delayed children. They said Wakefield had failed in his duties as a responsible consultant, acted against the interest of the parents, had acted dishonestly, and these are exact quotes, dishonestly and irresponsibly in his published research. Well, the General Medical, the GMC is also in the pocket of the pharma?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The school in which this was going to affect the vaccine. And let's make it clear, Andy never said don't vaccinate. He simply said, I'm recommending that people continue to get single vaccines that were available.
12 counts of falsehood they found?
If that's
abuse of developmentally, I mean, this is serious. This is a serious type of charges to put on somebody who's heading a movement. And the next guy is guy, Mark Geyer, right? Who's another guy. I think he appears in the movie.
I don't know anything about Mark Geyer. Geyer does not appear in my movie.
Okay, well, he's another one of the great advocates, and the things that the judges said about him. Oh my goodness!
All I want to say is anyone can go look up. Just look up the exoneration of Professor John Walker Smith and watch when a real judge that actually has to work in a real courtroom, which is all we want for vaccines, rules on the case that happened in England.
No.
And the most important thing is Andy never, ever said don't vaccinate. All he said was, since you have available to you a single measles, single mumps, single rubella vaccine, use that because there are too many parents claiming injury from the MMR, and when we've looked into it, the safety studies is really lacking. So I'm recommending stick to the single vaccines. So it's been misrepresented what he actually ever said. You said screaming from the rooftops. All he said was just split up your vaccines.
I didn't read his thing. I'm just reading what the GMC has written about him. Let me ask you a follow-up question. If we did a study like that, right, and it proved that vaccines in fact was safe, would you start vaccinating?
There's a good chance I might, but I'd have to. That's a completely hypothetical statement. But let me make
it's a hypothetical. We're having a hypothetical discussion. So you would start vaccinating if they would do that study. They took, 5,000 unvaccinated versus 5,000 vaccinated, and they showed that in fact these children were, they doubled their lifespan because of it.
I probably personally would not, but that's because
why
I have
not?
A little bit more. Huh?
Why not?
Because
Why not?
I actually believe my original statement that I believe that we have learned to live in concert with disease, and that disease is actually a necessary process to the human existence. And in a healthy body, I don't.
What does that mean? Explain what you just said. I didn't understand that.
I mean that I believe a child raised without pesticides and herbicides in their food, without, eating and drinking toxic foods like Coca-Cola and Doritos and all of this garbage we're putting in kids, by making sure that the water going into my child is not got chemicals and fluoride, that is perfectly clean spring water, the way God intended, I believe that that child's immune system is designed to get the measles and survive the 0.0002% chance of dying. And
do you think that medicine...
let me finish. I believe that child goes on to have lifelong, powerful immunity for life. We know that to be true.
So
and
just
so
like
all
you're
I'm
saying...
Yes.
So you're saying that...
I want my child to have a lifelong immunity that came from a natural occurrence and didn't involve injecting aluminum, a known neurotoxin. Mercury, a deadly toxin. Hold on, let me finish. Aborted fetal DNA, DNA from a dead baby.
Mercury, aluminum is every time you take antacid, you're taking aluminum, by the way. Do you take antacids?
I do not. No.
Oh, well, I do.
No, see, I wouldn't put aluminum in my body.
So you want to go back to the way medicine was basically 1,000 years ago?
No, I don't. I worked on the doctor's television show. I'm a pro-science. I've scrubbed into ORs. I think doctors are amazing. I do not think the pharmaceutical industry should be running my decisions, but I do believe that doctors in crisis, when our bodies are injured, it's a great and noble practice. I think the idea of injecting viruses and bacteria and heavy metals and toxins and formaldehyde into a perfectly healthy child is stupid.
Even though 99% of doctors think it's a very good idea, and the studies have proven it to be.
Huh?
Can I ask you a question? There's a concept now. This is this very interesting debate where we have a number of rabbis who say that if you believe medicine is not for you, then you should follow your beliefs.
Yeah.
Now, you believe in that?
I do. It's a free country. Isn't that what America was standing for? Was that my religious belief, my personal belief?
So let me ask you a question.
Held in this country.
My point is that if you're endangering somebody else, you have no right to live your belief when it's putting somebody else in danger.
I totally get that, and that's
so if the body of science, and there's not a single doctor, Wakefield lost his license, Geyer lost his license. You aren't a physician.
One doctor. Let me make this point. Look at Physicians for Informed Consent, a growing body of doctors that believe that vaccinations are not safe. They're all over the place. Look up the studies by Dr. Christopher Shaw in British Columbia, Dr. Christopher Exley in England, Dr. Roman Girardi in France, Dr. Zibin Yao in China, and what you will see is rat studies, sheep studies, monkey studies, demographic studies, brain autopsies, all showing that the aluminum in vaccines can and is causing autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis and diabetes.
Okay,
Tannin
wait.
is probably causing autism. I'll give you the list.
Okay, wait. So wait, I just looked it up. Hello. I just looked it up.
Yes.
This is the headline. Anti-vaccine pseudoscientist Christopher Shaw retracted. This is from. I'm reading it off the information. I don't know why he's called a pseudoscientist. Is he a doctor? Is he a doctor, by the way, or not?
Because anytime a scientist in our world today gets published in a scientific journal showing that vaccines are problematic, they are immediately listed as anti-vaccine. It just happened to Dr. Christopher Exley.
So he just lost. He just retracted it.
He is reading.
And let's read it. Let's just read it. You mentioned Christopher Shaw. I just looked it up.
I did.
Much of Shaw's anti-vaccine quote-unquote research.
Who's writing this? Who's writing this?
SkepticalRaptor.com has been.
Skeptical Raptor.
But it's just saying facts. Hello, it says it retracted.
Skeptical Raptor is like, let's go to Wikipedia too. Let's really get down.
But look at the facts.
Science.
Tell me if the facts are wrong or right. It was underwritten by the Dwoskin Family Foundation, the most profound anti-vaccine sponsor of research, right? The Dwoskins also underwrote the anti-vaccine safety conference in Jamaica, which, by the way, were you there or not?
I was not.
Okay, so I watched the conference on video, right? And here's what's interesting. They flew in one of the biggest experts in the world in immunology. Yehuda Schoenfeld.
Probably? Okay.
Yes, and Yehuda Schoenfeld spoke. World-renowned, and he got up at the anti-vaccine conference, and he said, here are many of the things that vaccines could cause. And then he said, but vaccines, quote, are the greatest advance in Western medicine, greater than antibiotics. They are the greatest advance in medicine in history. So he's speaking at the anti-vaccine conference, and what is he saying? He's saying yes, that you have 1 million cases. There's going to be a few fallouts here, there, and there. But you know what? It's prevented typhus, right, which would kill 50,000 people. Right?
We don't get a typhus vaccine.
But my point is, these are the things. It's all the infectious. It's taken the whole bite out of infectious diseases. The Black Death killed half of Europe. By destroying.
We have a vaccine for the Black Death.
No, but the current thing would be whooping cough. Whooping cough, rubella that would kill millions of children, have them deformed. These are the.
Not in America.
Well, that's what Schoenfeld disagreed with you, and you said he was one of the most highly respected physicians in the world, right?
I don't disagree with him. I don't. You're trying to manipulate the conversation into saying that I'm anti-vaccine and everybody's anti-vaccine. Yehuda Schoenfeld points out that we have safety issues, that these vaccines are causing real safety problems, real autoimmune disease. The studies I'm telling you all over the country, all over the world, are showing real safety issues with aluminum. In fact, I was in Portugal because Yehuda Schoenfeld had a conference specifically on aluminum adjuvants in vaccines because he recognizes
I heard his speech. I heard the
problematic.
Speech. And I heard the speech. And in that speech, he says it's the greatest advance in medicine in Western history. So what's he saying? He's saying anytime you take a foreign substance and put it into your body, there's a danger involved.
That's right, and that's
right?
why the government should never
But let's finish. But Dale, let's put it in perspective. What's he saying? He's saying when you take antibiotics, you could have an adverse reaction, right?
Sure.
Anytime you take a vitamin, when you take vitamin B12, you could have an adverse reaction. But when we look at society as a whole, it's cut out the greater body of infectious diseases, which killed most people 100 years ago. That's what Schoenfeld says, right?
Let me ask you this, because you brought it up. Would you mandate penicillin for every child that gets an infection? Would you force them to use penicillin?
It would depend if they're allergic to penicillin or not. I have no idea.
How do you know if they're allergic?
There are ways to test, I imagine, if somebody's allergic or not.
Okay. Perfect example. I want testing before we vaccinate. I don't want to just say I'm going to force you to take this product when we know.
Let's say there would be no way to test. Let's say there is no way to test. There is no way to test. What would you do?
Then I would look at, are we actually healthier and safer because of
than 100 years ago. Come on, it's just so silly. Of course, me and you wouldn't be on this phone if we weren't healthier today. Isn't that silly? They lived till 40. Today we live till 80. One in two children died.
If that was the case, nobody had grandparents. Thomas Jefferson didn't die.
That was the average. That was the average age. That was the average age.
Here's why I'm here. Here's why I left a medical talk show celebrating medicine and science and decided to really investigate this issue. I would not be here if we had the healthiest children in the world because we're the most vaccinated, and if we actually had the healthiest generation of children we've ever seen. Here are the numbers and stats as the CDC puts it out. We have gone, in the 1980s, our children had 12.8% chronic illness, meaning either a neurological disease or an autoimmune disease. That was when we were getting 10 vaccines. Now that we're getting 72 vaccines by the time we're 18, our chronic illness rate is 54% in America. 54% of American children either have a neurological disorder or a chronic autoimmune disease. Something has gone terribly wrong.
Let me tell you. Let me give you an example of some of the things that have gone wrong. Right? Let me tell you.
Okay.
Every time you eat a piece of meat, right, the animal's injected with antibiotics and 100 other things. Right? Every tomato you eat has all kinds of chemicals sprayed on it. The fertilizer that's put into the ground is in it. The air we filled is filled with toxins. It could be any one of these things. It could also be the fact that we're living longer. So how do we know? Why are we picking the one thing that has extended life and eliminated infectious diseases? Why don't you make it your life? Why don't you make it your life cause to speak against putting all these chemicals into every time you put a burger into your mouth?
You obviously haven't watched my show, The High Wire. I do.
No.
I believe that the same agencies, by the way, FDA approves all those herbicides and pesticides you're complaining about. You're telling me I'm supposed to trust government agencies when all of those toxins you just mentioned have been approved by our government. I have a problem with that.
But let me respond to that. Wait. I don't know. I don't think that government makes necessarily good decisions. I don't know that they're just regular people. Wait, let me finish my point. I don't think they make good decisions, but I do believe that for the most part, most government employees are honest, well-meaning individuals who are not looking to kill millions of children by hiding facts. So there's a big difference between saying that when they say, look, we believe this pesticide to be safe, they did a study, we believe it, that's one thing. To say we're going to hide evidence, we really want the death of American children, I don't believe that, no.
When did I accuse anyone of hiding?
Well, when we say that the CDC is covering up facts and they're in the pocket of big pharma.
I didn't say that. One of their own scientists is saying that.
So, but you agree with that, right? Do you agree with that, right?
Yeah. If a scientist tells me that he's committing scientific fraud, I listen to him.
So you believe that the CDC is basically looking not out for the welfare of American children, but is actually looking to hurt American children, and they are in the pocket of big pharma. They've been paid off, and they're saying, let's go kill those American kids.
No, let me get back to the point because we got off track. I want to finish the point that I was making about autoimmune disease and the rise in illness in our children. Everyone's seeing it. We're seeing asthma, anaphylactic food allergies, peanut allergies. You and I never saw when we were kids. You could always have a peanut butter jelly sandwich in school. What's going on? Now, true, you're right. I think we should be investigating everything that's going into our bodies. We should really be looking at what we're allowing industry to spew into our air, what we're allowing to go into our water, what we're allowing to be sprayed on our food and put in the ground. Definitely. I think we should be spending millions and millions, and everyone in America should stand up and say we want better safety studies on all of that. But here's my point. When we talk about autoimmune disease, that means your body is confused and it's suddenly attacking itself. It's attacking your pancreas, which ends up causing diabetes. It's attacking the...
I have a family member with an autoimmune disease.
Okay, so here is my point. If we have a crisis of autoimmune disease, which we have, it's skyrocketing and everyone's saying they don't know why, shouldn't we be looking closest at the one product that is designed to alter our immune system for life? That's what a vaccine does. Think about it. If you describe what a vaccine does, it's designed to trick your immune system into thinking it's had a disease. Now, we don't just trick the immune system of a baby 1 time, 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, 72 times. We are tricking the immune system.
Then why is it? But this is the speech of. But this is. This is Yehuda Schoenfeld's speech, and he's the one who says He absolutely says we should. This is Yehuda Schoenfeld, and he says absolutely says we should continue to vaccinate.
I am not telling anyone.
You're a meme. I'm saying the person who's the author of this speech said
you just
vaccinate.
Answer my point. Doesn't it seem reasonable that if autoimmune disease is the problem, and the one product that's forced on every kid in America actually affects their immune system, challenges it, incites it into a hyperactivity, that it might just be possible that in that exciting process, the body is attacking
without it, look, I think Yehuda Schoenfeld is yes, I think he's a great doctor.
Okay, so here's my problem. No one at the CDC and no one at the FDA is doing studies investigating exactly that issue.
So let me make a suggestion to you, Del. So let me make a suggestion to you. Okay? Sure. I think that's a valid point. But for you to have credibility when you express that point is if you wear the hat of an anti-vaxxer that all science is wrong, everybody's being paid off by big pharma.
When did I say all science is wrong?
Well, because all science is pro-vaccine, basically, right?
What? No, that's not true.
Except for these few doctors. You mentioned a few doctors. One was retracted it. One was discredited. The vast majority of science is pro-vaccine. Let me just finish my point. Then you will respond. I'll give you time. Okay. The vast majority of science is pro-vaccine, right? 99% of it. They say it doubled lifespans. It eliminated the vast majority of infectious diseases. And they say, yes, it should be mandatory, right? Now, the counter-argument is science isn't right. They're in the pocket of big pharma. Congress is in the pocket of pharma. CDC is in the pocket of big pharma. WHO is in the pocket of big pharma. The New England Journal of Medicine. Look, that's one argument. The other argument is, yeah, vaccines have done an incredible thing, like scientists says, but you know what? We gave the vaccine manufacturers a get-out-of-jail-free card, just a free pass to do anything they want, and that tort liability should be dialed back so that they are more responsible and that we could look at even if it's fractional, if it's 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 500, the damage to autoimmune disease, yes, we should be focusing more time and money on it. That's a credible argument, not the argument of let's stop vaccinating.
That's my argument. I didn't tell anyone to stop vaccinating.
Okay.
What I said is you should be allowed to not vaccinate if you have the same questions I do. I'm not telling anyone to do what I do. I take my kids skiing when they're 4 years old. A lot of people would say that's dangerous, that they could run into a tree. That is true, but I grew up and my parents took me skiing when I was 4. That's how I live. This is America. I raise my kids different than other people. I would never tell anybody you have to teach your kid to ski at 4. It's simply the way I was raised, and I live in a free country. The same thing is I believe there's definitely a risk to infectious disease. It's out there. I'm not crazy. But I am personally looking at the science of vaccines that has been done, a lot of it being funded by the very companies that make billions of dollars off of it. And when I get to, unlike most people, meet with the CDC, FDA, and HHS with Bobby Kennedy, and I ask them this question, will you please just do one study? They sit on a database called the VSD of 10 million people in America with all their medical records. They do most of their studies on it. We said just do one very simple study. You won't put anybody at risk because it's a retrospective study. Will you please compare the unvaccinated children that are by the tens of thousands in that database against the fully vaccinated kids and ask really simple questions. Who has more autism? Who has more ADD, ADHD? Who has more diabetes? Who has more, anaphylactic peanut allergies? Really simple questions. Please do that study so we can all see if there's a baseline, if there's a signal we should be looking into. And you know what they said to us? We can't figure out a way to do that study.
And why do you think they said that?
I have no idea how the brain trust of the greatest scientists in the world cannot figure out how to do a comparative study.
But why do you think they said it?
The same one they do with every drug. Because
why do you think? Yeah.
I believe that they already have done it. Because because that one study would shut me and Bobby Kennedy and everyone in the world that has questions about vaccines, it would shut us up immediately. And if they don't do that study,
why don't they do it?
I believe that they know what the answers are, and here's why I believe that.
So good.
One study out of Jackson, Mississippi. Let me point this out.
Let's assume you're right. I grant you that you're right, but let's say you're right. Okay. And so then why won't they do it then?
That's the question that boggles my mind.
So what do you think? What could be the possible answer?
Here's what I believe the possible answer is. I believe that our government that our Health and Human Services has a major conflict of interest. And that conflict of interest is this. Our Health and Human Services and CDC's, their primary objective is to stop infectious disease in America by promotion of vaccines. Perfectly noble cause. I have no problem with it. But now you have a problem when you take that same group that is supposed to be promoting vaccines and you give them the job of studying vaccine safety, studies like the one I'm asking for. Okay. And as Dr. William Thompson in my movie points out, we had a real problem because we were seeing a causal connection between the MMR vaccine at a rate of 4 times the amount of.
So why don't they want to do it? Why don't they want to do it? That's my question. If you assume that they're good people there and they're well-meaning people there, so why don't they want to do it?
I think that they have a real problem on their hands because the study is going to show what we know to be true, that there is a much larger group of injuries than we recognize. And they've made a major mistake because science has deferred to a statement that vaccines are safe and effective, period. Which
so why don't they want to do it?
Any logical person.
So what's the reason? So why don't they want to do it?
If the studies of aluminum that prove out, and we start looking at the same thing and finding the same thing, huge rates of autoimmune disease, what happens to the confidence in our vaccine program? What happens to the confidence of every doctor that said, I believe in this product? What happens to the confidence?
So why won't they do it? So what do you think?
I just told you. Because if
they're embarrassed? They're embarrassed of being shown to be wrong?
More than embarrassed, yes. It's more than
Come on. This is the government. Every month somebody steps up, somebody steps down. I'm not responsible. Today there's this Congress, tomorrow there's another. Do I care what 5 years ago, 10 years ago, some scientist said? I'm the new guy in charge. He's buried. My job is to make him look bad. I don't care what happened to them.
Like you.
What?
I think that you said you had a relative with an autoimmune disease. I don't know what the autoimmune disease is. I don't know if it's on the list of autoimmune diseases.
It is. It's on Schoenfield's list. I heard the thing.
Okay. So what happens to all the families like you that were told vaccines were safe and effective? And
we're very, very upset.
You are very pissed off. And guess how many of you there are?
I don't care how many there are. So what? That was the last administration. Hello, now we're under Trump. It's a new administration. Their goal is to make prior administrations look as bad as possible. Everything Obama did is corrupt. What's a better way to do it than to say, you know what? Under him, everything the CDC said was wrong, and now we're right. Who cares? Is that a reason not to disclose it?
Here's the reason they're not disclosing it.
Yeah.
If it proves to be true. I'm saying these are investigations that all I'm calling for is these investigations.
I'm trying to understand the logic. What could be their motive, right?
Here it is.
Yeah.
Maybe, just maybe, some of these vaccines really are vital to society. Maybe they are, okay? Maybe polio really is vital. Maybe those things, and certainly you have to admit that the CDC and HHS believes that it's critical that those vaccines be given, correct?
Right.
Okay? Now, if they put out the truth, if they did a study that showed that the increase in autoimmune disease is actually being contributed in a very major way by vaccines, what would happen? Everyone would stop using every single vaccine, and then, as far as the CDC is concerned, mayhem, and as you pointed, returns in 100 years.
There would be plagues. So they're making a decision. Right. Hello, I agree with you. So they're making the decision. They're making the decision, which is what Schoenfeld really said. He said, yes, this can cause autoimmune issues, right? When you get the flu shot, it may or may not. But we know that it's going to say. We know that it's going to say. He says we know that for the vast majority, it's like somebody said. He said wearing a seatbelt can be very dangerous in certain accidents. Right? If your car, but it's still, for the vast majority of accidents, it's safer to wear a seatbelt than not to wear a seatbelt. So we say wear a seatbelt.
The studies I'm talking about would be the only ways you could prove that statement.
Okay, but we agree that is. I agree, and Schoenfeld agrees that is what's sitting up in the CDC's mind. That the plagues of infectious diseases are far greater. The life quality of America's is substantially better, and we're more afraid of that side than of this side. That's what it basically boils down to, isn't it?
Yes, but as you pointed out,
you know what's so interesting, Del? After a long argument, we agree more than we disagree.
I'm telling you, if you stop calling people anti-vaxxers, you would recognize that we have a very important discussion that we need to be having in this country. That is my point. I'm telling you that, yes, because there is such a terror of what would happen should a problem with the vaccine come out, they are refusing to do any studies that might show that. That's problematic. It's problematic for you since we now have 250 more vaccines coming our way. The Health and Human Services wants to start mandating vaccines for adults, and I'm saying, wait, hold on a second. Before you do that, simply start doing some really important studies. I want to see a comparison. I need you to prove to me that unvaccinated kids are just as sick as vaccinated kids or vice versa. Because here's what I know. There was a study in 2017 that compared unvaccinated kids to vaccinated kids. Very small study, I'll admit. It's about 650 kids. But it shows what we...
Yeah, but I saw that study. That it wasn't. It was the study was done by Jenny McCarthy, who founded it.
No, that's not true. Not true.
It was. It was done by two. It was. She funded it, right? She was one of the two funders, right? And the other funder was I forgot who it was.
It was done by professor of epidemiology.
Yeah, and it was done by a mail-in. It was done by a mail-in to a bunch. It was not peer reviewed. It's junk. It's just junk. It's garbage.
It was peer reviewed. It didn't get published. No, not true.
It didn't get published. Whatever. It's just a junk study.
In your opinion. But here's the point. Whether or not what it showed was what we thought. 4 times the rate of autism. They showed that, yes, unvaccinated kids had more measles, had more chicken pox, as you would expect.
It was
vaccinated kids.
It wasn't done with double blind. It was just a mailer. It was just a junk study. We shouldn't even discuss it. Honestly, I think it's a junk.
No, we should. Here's
junk
why
science.
Here's why we should. It's not junk science to compare 2 groups of kids. What it is
junk
is
science
basic,
when you
ground.
Yeah.
It showed 4 times the rate of autism, 5 times the rate of neurological disorders, 30 times the rate of allergies. And here's the point: no one should say that proves that these things do this. But what it shows is a potential signal. And what it shows is that the CDC should be doing that exact study only under supervision, scientists that have at least a reasonable amount of skepticism to say we're going to make sure the study is done right. In fact, I would prefer that we have a totally independent, private, never, ever weighed either side of this issue so that we have real, unbiased science being done to do that exact study. Because whether or not it was too small, and I'll give you all of those, why is it the CDC refuses to do the larger study? You agreed that it would be very problematic if it sees the things we're seeing. So you tell me, and it is possible, as Yehuda Schoenfeld said, that these autoimmune diseases are being caused by vaccines. We don't know the rate because everyone is terrified to collect data on these issues. And this is my last point, unless you want, I'll go on all day. But here's the point. When we say that vaccines don't injure anybody, here's what we know. There's only one database that really records injury from vaccines in America. It's called VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. Okay. So VAERS in 2016 alone had 59,711 reported injuries, 432 deaths, 10,000 emergency room visits, okay, in 1 year. I think for most people, 432 deaths, that's, by the way, the same amount that ever died of measles in one of the worst years we ever had it. So vaccines can kill. Now, I'll agree with you that it's a passive reporting system. We can't totally trust it because it's not being verified against the double-blind group. But
look at the other side.
Here's the bigger problem.
Yeah.
Let me just finish. Here's the bigger problem. We have 59,000 reported injuries. Well, Health and Human Services that manages the VAERS system has done multiple internal investigations, one by Harvard Medical School, and what they discovered was VAERS is only capturing less than 1% of the total amount of injuries. So that means that we aren't looking at 59,000. We could potentially be looking at 5.9 million injuries a year. It's possible, if we're to take Health and Human Services' word for it, that 432 deaths could be 43,000 deaths. Now, this is no way to do science.
All I would say is we could speak about these statistics. Like I could say, if you took the American population of 330 million and you said we doubled the population double their lifespan, that's 165 million deaths that we're saving.
You can't prove. You have no way to prove to me.
It's true. We can't prove we can't prove it. But I could just tell you what the body. But it's more than that. It's what the body of 200,000 American physicians agree. So for me and you who never went to medical school, and we have a discredited doctor in Indy Wakefield who lost his license, and Geyer who lost his license, and that other fellow who was called to be a liar, that fellow, that other scientist, I forgot his name. So we have 200,000 scientists who this is what they do for a living are saying this is the most important advance in medical medicine, and me, you, and a few other guys in a coffee shop are sitting around and making up statistics.
And every scientist in Galileo's time thought the Earth was the center of the universe. Throughout science and throughout history. So
based on that, should we agree? We should agree. But then, for that matter, we should agree Martians are living among us. Like at a certain point, you can't say if Galileo they didn't believe they didn't believe the sun revolved around the sun, so maybe we should believe Martians because science has no credibility anymore.
No, not true. What I'm saying is that science is the one place where we know consensus actually doesn't mean anything. That every adjustment in science, Einstein, all of the great scientific changes and growth and evolution of science always happened because of 1 man, 10 people. It was never the body, and often they're fought by the body that says no. I didn't believe that was true. Why do they not believe it's true? Not because you're not telling me 230 immunologists.
But can I just say something? If we throw science out the window, so then we can basically say like,
that's not what I'm asking for.
You're saying that the consensus of science doesn't mean anything.
I'm saying that the consensus is a religion. It's not a science. Science does studies to prove itself.
So I'm saying so when you have 99% of scientists say that this is a good thing, right? 99%.
I don't know how they do that.
Well, neither do I, but they do.
No, hold on. Let me make the point. I don't understand how they do that when they have never done a comparative study of vaccinated and unvaccinated. How do you get that determination?
So we had on a doctor today. We had on a doctor today, right?
Okay.
Who's a doctor of a community. He says he's given over 1 million vaccines over his career, right?
Okay.
And he says in my 1 million vaccines that I've given out, I've never had an adverse serious reaction beyond some fever, some swelling, etc., right? And then he'll say, in our community, we have unvaccinated children, and I do see disease among them. So he's talking without a big study. He hasn't had a commission. We had him on the radio. So he's just saying,
you're telling me,
this is what I do for a living, and this is what I see, right?
So what you're telling me is the millions of kids he's given vaccines to.
1 million, he said.
Somehow... Huh? How many?
He said I gave 1 million vaccines.
Okay. So of the 1 million vaccines, he has somehow avoided having 1 in 36 of his patients have autism, which is the rate in New Jersey. He has
No. But you're distorting things.
In 1 in 12.
But you're distorting things. But there's been.
No, I'm not.
But he's also He's also had a lot. And you could continue. You could say he's also avoided having the 1 in 2 people who are overweight in America. How did he manage that? Right. He's also had the 1 in 2 children who ended up with parents didn't get divorced. He didn't do that either. He's also avoided having the 1 in 2 people who hate the Republicans. I mean, isn't that absurd?
Well, it is if you're telling me that your so-called anti-vaxxers are blaming the divorce on vaccines.
Well, I think we could gain weight gain on it too. We could gain everything we want. He's saying I have never. He's saying I have never seen. He's saying I have never seen in 1 million cases where I gave a vaccine and it caused an immediate reaction that I could say was due to the vaccine. That's what he said.
That's because
Had him on.
He has an unfounded belief that all the autoimmune diseases Yehuda Schoenfeld is talking about are not caused by vaccines. If he didn't hold that religious belief, he would tell you, actually,
he says, I didn't.
My kid has autism.
I didn't. He says, I didn't see it. But he says, I did. It's nothing that I could evidence.
So it doesn't exist. So those diseases
he says, I didn't evidence it.
His kids.
He says, I didn't see it.
He doesn't believe it.
He doesn't believe that's something that happened later. He doesn't know. I can't prove it. He says, I could tell you that what happened a week or 2 after somebody got a red arm, somebody had this. I never had shock. I never had. So when you take the vast 99% of science, do we believe science or don't we believe science? That's the question.
I believe science when it does appropriate studies to prove itself. And
so you believe that the 90% of science is delusional?
I believe that it is using really crappy science to make a statement. It has never done a double-blind inert placebo study.
Because for ethical reasons they're not allowed to.
And so let's skip the ethical problem. Let's go with an epidemiologic study of the 10 million people in the database and compare vaxxed to unvaccinated. If they're not doing the most obvious studies like that, I have to assume as a journalist they're hiding something. And as a journalist, I also say this. follow the money. You're talking about an industry that has a product they're allowed to force upon us, meaning they force us to spend tens of billions of dollars on their product because they are the number one lobby in Washington, outspending oil and gas 2-to-1. They're buying politicians. They're getting health departments to force more and more of these products upon us without any safety study.
Valid point.
As you said,
good point.
Don't have to do a safety study because it's unethical.
Del, good point.
I'm really nervous.
So let me ask you a question.
Making billions of dollars, making decisions in our politics, and forcing their products onto our healthy children.
Good. Well, have you ever heard of the maxim, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure?
Yes, I have.
Do you believe in it?
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I mean, it's a statement. Sure, it's a good idea.
So let me ask you.
Let me make this point. Of course I do.
So let me ask the following question. Let me ask you the following.
Does not have.
Hello.
No, let me make my point.
I didn't make a point yet. I just asked a question.
Okay.
So now let me ask you a question, a follow-up.
Okay.
If you're the CEO of a pharma company, and you could give out MMR vaccines, whatever they cost, a couple of bucks each, right? Or on the other hand, you could say, you know what, let the kids get measles, because if they get pneumonia, right, I have a whole diary of antibiotics I'm going to give them that are tens of thousands of dollars, $6,000 to cure pneumonia in the United States, according to Wikipedia. Right? Let them get the ear problems that 1 in 20 kids who get the measles have, which is 300,000 in pharma. Let them get encephalitis, 52,000 in pharma.
I have news for you.
Do I want to sell the ounce of prevention or sell the 100 pounds of cure? If you're the CEO of the pharma company, if I was, I would say, and I didn't care, I would say, kill them all. Let's let them all get sick. It's going to be, we'll have the biggest earnings ever.
That would so be true if that was true. But here's the problem. My kids don't get ear infections. My kids actually don't get sick. And if you ask all the unvaccinated parents around the country, they will tell you, my kid is running circles around everyone on his baseball team.
So kids today are healthier than they were. Kids today without medicine. I got it. Kids today are healthier than they were 100 years ago when 1 or 2 kids died in childhood.
They are not healthier than they were in 1980, and that's my problem. I don't want to go back 100 years. I want to go back 20 or 30. Here are the stats. More babies die on the first day of life in America than every other industrialized nation combined.
And this has to do with vaccines? This has to do with vaccines?
I'll get to it. 70% more likely to die before adulthood than all of the other richest nations in the world. You are more likely to die giving birth as a mother in America than every other industrialized nation.
And this is because of vaccines? Because of vaccines?
Yes, we are one of the only countries. We are one of the only countries that gives a day-one-old baby a hepatitis B vaccine within 24 hours.
And why does the mother die then? You said the mother dies. Why do the mothers die?
I believe the fact that we're giving flu shots while they're pregnant now, which has never been approved for safety, and the fact that we're giving more and more DTaP vaccines to pregnant women.
Do you have any proof of this? But do you have any proof of this?
That they're giving flu shots to pregnant women?
No. Do you have any proof for any of these statements?
About what? That
you just said that the mothers are dying in birth because they're getting a flu shot while they're pregnant.
No, I'm saying it's a theory we should be investigating. Because what we do know, the difference we're seeing, when I was a producer on the Daytime Talks of the Doctors, I believe we have the best doctors in the world in America. I believe we have the best hospitals in the world in America. I cannot understand for the life of me then, and I also believe we have the best running water, probably the best food supply. I'm guessing one of the better air supplies in the world. Why are our babies dying on the first day more than everybody else?
So, what does science say about that?
Well, I would say that science being done around the world in mice and in monkeys is showing that
in the United States, what are scientists in the United States saying about that?
What they will say is, well, we have more preterm births.
Okay.
Is why. Okay, that's their argument. And I would ask them, why our mothers are giving birth earlier than other people? All questions that demand scientific answers. But here's my issue.
So do you think it's in the place of me and you?
This is a very important point.
Yeah.
This is a very important point.
Yeah.
Hepatitis B is like AIDS. Okay, it's a major blood disease you only get from sharing heroin needles. I question why every doctor that you said 99% of doctors says it's a great idea to give basically an AIDS-type disease that my baby can only come in contact with if they're sexually active with promiscuous people or sharing needles. Why do we need to give that vaccine on day one? Why can't we wait to 2 years old or 4 years old? Why can't I get a sensible reaction to say, let's stop giving the hepatitis B vaccine that is totally unnecessary on day one and see if the death rate of day one old babies goes down? I do not see the risk in stopping a hepatitis B vaccine because we're already hepatitis B positive. Okay?
Well, thank you, Del. We're way over time. We just don't have that much time in our program. Well, thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate your time.
All the best.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.